Hi, welcome to Highland Cottage Books. I'm Martha, and this is Highland Cottage, and today I'm going to talk to you about a few books that you should put on your TBR for spooky season. That's right, it is September, which means it's officially Halloween. You know, as soon as it becomes an Ember month, it means it's time to pull out the pumpkin spice and the sweaters and ignore the fact that it is still roasting in Philadelphia. No, it's fall. We got fall vibes. So, spooky books are on the way. I made coffee with pumpkin spice and tea. Have a seat on the couch and let's talk spooky books. Coming out on September 16th is Fiend by Alma Katsu. This book reminded me a lot of Mike Flanagan's The Fall of the House of Usher, which could never be a bad thing. It is about a family, the Berishas, who are the owners of one of the largest import-export businesses in the world. They have an accumulated a stupid amount of wealth over the course of several generations, and things just seem to work out for them. If there's a business rival that's getting in their way, it wouldn't be unusual if that person all of a sudden had a stroke, or if there was some evidence of some fairly sketchy business practices. Well, that kind of thing catches on fire, and buildings that are in their way suddenly get swallowed by earthquakes. They lived a rather charmed life, and in fact, their patriarch says that they are a blessed family. I don't know if blessed is exactly the right word for what they are. They are something. But the family is five members. There's a mother and the father, Zev, and three children. Darden, who is the eldest son, and he is the heir. We have Maris, who is the older daughter, who's very ambitious. And then we have Nora, who is the youngest daughter, and she is basically perpetually overlooked. Each of their children have their own ideas about the future of the company, particularly Maris, who feels that she would be a much more worthy successor to her father than her brother, who seems a little bit ineffectual and dithering. And she is willing to do anything to show her father that she is worthy of the crown and also his love. A lot of this book has to do with the fact that the father, for various reasons, has been a bit unavailable to his children, and they are all clamoring for his attention one way or another. Unfortunately for Maris, she soon discovers that she's in a little bit over her head. There isn't a single likable or admirable character in this book, but that doesn't mean that they're not compelling. And while it's hard to pick a dog in this particular fight, it is very interesting watching them kind of scrambling over each other, trying to get their hands on whatever prize it is that they think is at the end of this rainbow. The sheer emptiness of their lives can make the rest of us in the 99% feel a little bit better about ourselves as we clip coupons. From a brand new release to a book that came out 10 years ago, Wylding Hall by Elizabeth Hand is about a folk rock band in the 1970s who recorded their seminal album while they were isolated on a sort of ramshackled old estate in the country. Decades later, the surviving members of the band are being interviewed about that halcyon summer. What I really appreciate about this book is that it's really hard to write about music, but Hand does it in a way that is very effective. She doesn't dumb it down. These musicians are talking about music in the language of music, the way that musicians would talk. They just kind of bring you along for the ride and dare you to catch up, and you will catch up. Also, the members of the band are very young. They are between the ages of 17 and 23-ish. And so all of them are going through this period of change in this isolated place, living their dream just making music, wearing cool clothes, exploring the countryside. And it would be wonderful if it weren't for the fact that something has gone horribly wrong with this album. And more to the point, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong with Julian Blake, who is the band member who is no longer with us. The book has a compelling plot and interesting characters, but I think its greatest strength is just its spooky vibes. It's beautiful and dreamy and nostalgic and just a little bit haunted. It wasn't until after I finished this book that I realized that Elizabeth Hand was the author of another of my favorite spooky books, Blacklight, which came out 26 years ago and I read probably about 20 years ago. I still remember the experience of reading that book. I remember picking it up at a used bookstore and saying, this looks interesting. And I remember just inhaling it over the next few days. In some ways, that book is a little bit similar in that it's about a teenage girl who is the goddaughter of an experimental filmmaker, and she finds herself kind of on the edges and the fringes of that scene. Kind of think about like Kenneth Anger and Andy Warhol and The Factory. And she ends up going to a party that changes her life. What I remember most about that story is that Hand captured this idea that I hadn't been able to put into words before I had read this book. When I was in high school, I went to a private day boarding school, very insular community around that school. And all of my brothers and sisters also went to that school. And we weren't particularly outliers. We had similar experiences that our friends had, that other people who went to the school had. But my sister and I, in particular, when we went to college, we would talk about some of the things we had experienced and done with our new college friends. And, you know, everybody was sharing stories about growing up, and we would share our stories. And both of us had the experience of people looking at us like, wait, what? Wait, what? And we didn't understand, because the things that were incredibly normal to us that we had done, that we had seen, were really unusual when compared with the things that our new friends had gone through. Just the understanding that if you are immersed in a culture or a situation where the unusual is normal, where whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just normal for you. And you can kind of assume that that's just what life is like. That is what normal is for everyone, because that's what your life was like. That must be what it's like for everyone else. The protagonist of Blacklight is in a highly unusual situation, but she has no baseline to compare it to. So she doesn't know that she is perhaps in danger. I spoke about the library at Hellebore by Cassandra Khaw at length in my StokerCon wrap-up, but I wanted to include it here because I love that book. It's new, and it ticks all the boxes for September. It is a horror story, so it's got those spooky fall feelings. It's also dark academia because it takes place in a magical college, and it's just a great book. You should absolutely be reading it. So the library at Hellebore is about a college for people with extraordinary abilities. So think maybe like Xavier Academy, but the people, the students who go to this school are way off the charts. We are talking about one of them is a son of Lucifer. Another one has the ability to start the apocalypse. Others have various talents and skills that Ka sort of unfurls for you over the course of the book. None of them are just one thing. These characters are incredible and amazing. That's not the only reason why this university is unusual. Perhaps the most upsetting thing about the school is that on graduation day, the faculty eats the students. The book follows a few members of the senior class who have managed to survive by hiding in the titular library. This book is very dark, it's very gory, and it's a lot of fun. And finally, my favorite book of the month, The Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, which comes out September 30th, and you should pre-order it right now. It is incredible. It is by Philip Fracassi, who has written a bunch of great books, none of which I have read, but I am going to change that now that I've read this one. Oh my God, it is so good. We are following Rose Dubois, who is the resident of a senior living community where her neighbors seem to be dying at an unusually fast clip. And she and her friends are trying to convince the administration and the authorities that something is going on, but nobody's really listening to them. The administration wants to sell apartments, and nobody wants to come to a community where people are dying off, while the authorities are being a bit lazy, perhaps, or dismissive because they think, well, it's old people die. While this book is absolutely a slasher story with the requisite blood and guts and suspense and fears and scares, the main source of the horror is just the way in which the younger people treat the older people in the book. They infantilize them, they patronize them, they assume that they are enfeeble, that they don't have anything contribute. They must not know what they are talking about. They don't understand how the world works. And the sheer helplessness that this would create in you. Also, Fracassi does a great job talking about death in this book. And I'm not talking about, kind of death. I'm talking about the fact that people move into these communities to make friends with their neighbors and to have an active lifestyle, yes, but also because they know at some point they may need hospice care, or they may need memory care, or they may need more help doing day-to-day stuff like getting dressed or taking a bath or going to the toilet. And the sort of terror and fear that would come along with that in a way that's much more concrete than when, say, you were 30 or 40 or 50, you know, in your 70s or your 80s that death is coming soon for you. So that is a constant in this book as well. However, you want to go out on your own terms. You certainly don't want to do it in the way that these residents are being forced to die. Fracassi does a great job making us care about every single one of these characters. These are not cardboard cutout teenagers being chased by a masked killer. These are fully fledged people with histories and foibles and who have had fascinating lives and who continue to live fascinating lives. And it is very powerful to see them fighting off death. Of course, because these are not teenagers, when they run, we hear about their joints creaking. We understand that they are not sprinting. They are running as fast as an 85-year-old can run. And that's another source of fear, just the fear of being weak or being physically at a disadvantage when you need it the most. All the characters are great. In particular, there is a lovely relationship between Rose and her neighbor, Tatum Bird. Tatum Bird lives in the health center and he has dementia. He spends his days feeding the fish outside on the bench and also looking for his lost dog, Jack. Of course, Jack actually has been dead for decades, but Tatum doesn't know that. And we understand everything we need to know about Rose by the way in which she interacts with Tatum and the patience and the kindness that she extends to him. And it also is understandable, though, other people don't want to spend time with him because it's scary. And he is a signpost, perhaps, of what the future might look like for them. So that's another layer of fear. But as I said, Rose is brave and she's smart and she's no nonsense and she's also hilarious and she's sort of a modern day Miss Marple. She is one of my favorite characters that I've read this year. And I hope in the tradition of slashers that she shows up again and that there's a sequel. Other memorable characters include a retired football player, a retired actor, a retired filmmaker who's still making movies, and a professor, as well as a conspiracy theorist who just wants to meet an alien. So if you pick up one book this month, make it this one. All right, I'll stop gushing, but not before I tell you that this book made me laugh out loud, it made me scared, and it also made me cry. So good. It was so good. So that's it. A bunch of books for you to put on your TBR this spooky season. See you soon. Bye, and subscribe.